Turning now to the 2024 presidential race, where we're starting to see more and more ads from Trump rivals looking to put a dent in his lead over the Republican field. Fresh off of raising $70 million for political races this cycle, the Koch political network's Americans for Prosperity Action is out with two ads hitting Trump on electability, arguing that if he's the nominee, Republicans across the board will lose. Take a listen.
Instead of making Biden answer for his reckless progressive agenda, Trump makes the debate about indictments, personal grievances, and the election he lost. Sure, he did some good things as president, but the reality is Republicans lose if Trump is our nominee.
With Donald Trump, Republicans lost the House, lost the White House and the Senate. And we've lost our chance to capitalize on Biden's devastating record. If Donald Trump is the GOP nominee, we could lose everything.
Well, additionally, a super PAC backing Mike Pence is attacking his former boss on foreign policy.
America doesn't stand with thugs and dictators. We confront them. Or at least, we used to.
There can be no room in the leadership of the Republican Party for apologists for Putin. There can only be room for champions of freedom.
Joining me now to talk about this on set is Daniella Diaz, a congressional reporter for Political, Democratic pollster and NBC News political analyst Cornell Belcher, and Jim Geraghty, senior political correspondent for the National Review. So, Daniella, I watch these ads, and it reminds me as if I'm watching something from maybe the early 2000s, the late 90s. I mean, it's seemingly how you might win a Republican primary back then. We're way past. This is a different time, isn't it? Is this going to resonate with Republican voters?
Well, I do want to say you're going a little too far back for me to remember, Ryan.
Gen Z.
But yeah, well, millennial. But look, we've covered elections before, you and I have, and this is interesting because the last election we just covered, 2020, we didn't see this divisiveness in the Republican Party. We saw a candidate like Donald Trump, who was the clear lead. Now we're seeing his former vice president campaign against him on almost every issue. And he says, of course, January 6th was the pivotal moment for him. He still defends his decision to not overturn the election, which is what Donald Trump wanted. But we're also seeing this Koch group pumping millions of dollars into this race. A surprise because they're also saying they're going to support a candidate in this primary, something they haven't done before. And so that money is going to be consequential as we watch this primary play out. And it's going to be incredibly, as I said earlier, very, very divisive. These ads, of course, a major, major key to try to win over voters in this post-pandemic.
Yeah, Jim, and I'm interested in your thoughts about this Pence strategy, because he was such a defender of the Trump policies when he was his vice president, didn't really make the break until well after January 6th. Now he's attacking some of these policies that he was a part of. Is it strange to see him go in that direction?
Well, you know, a mob trying to kill you can really change your perspective on things.
Took a while, though.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the message of any of these ads. I do think the timing is odd. I don't mean which decade. I mean, it's midsummer. It's the 4th of July weekend. I don't know who's paying that much attention to politics right now. The Republican debate is in August, towards the end of the month, and maybe at that point, I think people might be tuning in and a little more receptive to messages like this. I don't know if necessarily any of these ads are a form of panic, but I do kind of feel like if you're Pence, you've jumped into the race, everybody knows you're in it, and you're at, what, 5%, 6%, a whole bunch of polls? You have not made a splash. It is Trump, it is DeSantis quite a bit behind him, and then everybody else is in single digits. So I don't think it's not panic time, but that little bit of concern that, you know, as Yogi Berra used to say, it gets later out there earlier than you think.
Well, to your point on the debates, Pence said an interesting thing on the trail this weekend, is that he debated Donald Trump plenty of times without the cameras on. It didn't seem like he won too many of those debates, judging by their policy decisions. I mean, do you think that has any impact on the debate itself?
I suppose if at some point Mike Pence says, you know, back when we were, you know, just you and me in the Oval Office, you said you wanted to rescind the Second Amendment or some sort of, you know, like maybe something like that would make a splash. But again, it's tough to be, when you're vice president, it's very tough to look bigger and stronger and more influential than the guy whose job is just president.
So Cornell, you're the pollster here. You're the one that gets into these numbers, and kind of getting back to this point I was making before about what it was like to run as a Republican maybe 10 years ago versus what it's like now. Are these kind of messages resonating with Republican primary voters? Well,
I think let's take them apart and take them on one by one. I get the Pence ad, because actually I don't see it as a foreign policy ad at all. It is about strength and leadership. And one of the key characteristics, especially on the Republican side, and they want in their leaders, is a strong leader. And that Donald Trump has shown in spades, that he's sort of the tough guy. He's their tribal warrior. So the Pence ad, to me, is really, and I think you're going to see this continue to unfold, they're really going to come after him on leadership and try to make him out not to be, in fact, a very strong leader. I think it's a long shot, but it's probably one of the best, probably one of the best he's got. On the super PAC side, I think it's very interesting, because we typically say in campaigns, if you're arguing process, you're losing. Right. And this is very much a process argument that is sort of appealing to the rationale of primary voters. You know, as someone who's worked in primaries a lot, you know, trying to appeal to the rationale as opposed to the emotional part of a primary voter is tough, and it's also problematic from this standpoint. Is this ideal that Donald Trump doesn't beat Joe Biden. You've seen our NBC numbers. We've all seen our NBC numbers. Most Republicans think that Donald Trump actually did beat Joe Biden.
Right. So they don't believe that argument.
So
right.
I think it's a tough argument for them to carry.
Yeah, and then just from a pollster's perspective, too, at what point are we going to get too far for someone to get out of this hole that they've dug as it relates to the margin between Donald Trump and the rest of the field?
We might be too far.
We might be already there.
We might already be there, because if you look at his margin right now, he's actually at a larger margin now than he was in 2016 when he won. And look at his record haul that he just took in. Right, you're looking at the money that the super PACs brought in, but Donald Trump has raised a record amount of money after being indicted. Right. So his money's grown, and his support in the primary electorate has grown after being indicted.
Yeah. So, Daniel, let's get back to this point that you made about January 6th and the impact it's going to have on the race. This is what a voter confronting Mike Pence over his actions on January 6th. This happened in Iowa. Take a listen.
If it wasn't for your vote, we would not have Joe Biden in the White House. That was a constitutional right that you had to send those votes back to the states.
States conduct our elections. You never want to let Washington, D.C. run elections. The Constitution affords no authority for the Vice President or anyone else to reject votes or return votes to the states. Never been done before. Should never be done in the future. I'm sorry, ma'am, but that's actually what the Constitution says. President Trump was wrong about my authority that day, and he's still wrong.
Caught in the background there as a congressional reporter, I can't ignore Randy Finstra. Seemed to be gulping as he's listening to that exchange. But to Cornell's point, that when we're talking about this, it's almost like we're dealing with a different set of facts when it comes to Republican primary voters, and it was displayed there, right?
Yeah, and I was there on January 6th, Ryan, so this is all still very fresh in my mind as I witness, you know, a Republican base who Pence is trying to win over still bring up what happened that day and say that the election should have been overturned and Joe Biden shouldn't have been president. Yeah. And I think, you know, Pence that was a very, as we all remember, a moment for Pence where he defended his decision and also broke from Trump, whether it took a while, of course. And then this was, of course, toward the end of the 4 years that they were both in office. But he still has to defend his decision to not do that. And he's going to have to continue to defend to voters who believe, as Cornell said, that the election shouldn't have been won by Joe Biden. Right. This is not the end of that.
And, you know, Jim, I don't know if we're ever going to stop being surprised by Donald Trump, but he found a way to surprise us yet again when he said on his Truth Social app over the weekend that the special counsel investigating him, Jack Smith, looks like a crackhead. And then he accused Joe Biden of having cocaine. The kind of the weird path that he took from the cocaine discovered at the White House to get to the point that the special prosecutor is a crackhead is still kind of a head scratcher. But there's no penalty for him with Republican primary voters, it seems, when it comes to making outlandish claims like this.
No, and he suffers a penalty amongst general election voters. I will say that when you look at Joe Biden and the way he is at 80 years old, the voice that kind of wanders, the shuffling of his feet and all that stuff, my first thought is cocaine. He looks like he's really hopped up on stuff. Yes, good call there, Donald. You really nailed that one. I'm just watching that clip of Mike Pence earlier. Look, he's going to get this kind of question from now until whenever his campaign ends. I do think, if nothing else, he has perfected the facial expression of, you poor, poor woman, I hope you get the mental health and the help that you need. Because that's all he can do. He basically says, you're wrong at the end. But that woman has the same number of votes in the primary process as he does.
Yes, right. So, speaking of head-scratching things, I want to play for you this video of Donald Trump supporting LGBTQ rights that the Ron DeSantis team posted over the weekend. Take a listen to this.
I think, identifying Donald Trump as really being a pioneer in injecting gender ideology into the mainstream, where he was having men compete against women in his beauty pageants. I think that's totally fair game, because he's now campaigning saying the opposite. We believe in protecting the rights of our girls and the rights of women athletes to be able to participate with fairness and with integrity.
This, of course, DeSantis responding to this video that they posted. But Cornell, this for you, again, gets back to kind of the psyche of the Republican primary voter. A lot of us probably watched that video and were like, could not believe that a candidate for president posted something like this. But does it work with primary voters in the Republican Party?
We will see. I mean, the take on, let's first call out the ad for what it was. It was brazenly homophobic. And I'm just shocked at how brazenly homophobic it was. And it's not okay. Yeah. It's not okay for us to mainstream this. It's yet to be seen. I think that this idea that Donald Trump is somehow to the left on cultural issues, I think it's yet to be seen. I think it's an interesting play. I don't know how successful it would be, but I get from a campaign tactic to try to attack him to the right of Donald Trump on cultural issues. We'll see how it plays.
Yeah. To Jim's point, may be okay in the primary, but kill you in the general election.
Yes.
We'll have to see. Daniella Diaz, Cornell Belcher, Jim Geraghty, great conversation. We appreciate you being here. And still to come.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.